True Open Source Advocate, and I'm back with part 2 for our Virt Manager and FreeIPA setup. So today, on this particular episode, I want to go through how you actually set up the server side. And there's a few things we need to do in order to make sure that everything's set up correctly for our network and everything like that to work. So we'll go through that as well. I want to say thank you to all of my subscribers and all of my patrons over at Patreon. Seriously, you guys make this so worth it for me to do these videos every week. I really truly enjoy it, and I just can't say thank you enough. If you're enjoying these videos, subscribe. Let YouTube know that I'm doing a good job by subscribing to the channel. Plus, you'll get notified when I have new videos coming out. And finally, if you're enjoying what I'm doing, give it a like. Just click on that thumbs up, and that way YouTube knows that you like it, and they'll pass it along to other people that might enjoy my content as well. I really appreciate it. Thank you again. Let's get started. Last episode we went through setting up Virt Manager, so if you haven't done that one already and you don't have Virt Manager installed already, go back and watch episode 1 or part 1 of this series, because you do need just to follow along with me and make sure that you're doing things in a way that makes sense as we go along. I don't want you to be lost when we start this one, but basically Virt Manager is a virtual machine system, so getting it set up is really important, and then getting a couple of actual virtual machines that we're going to be using set up the same way that I've got set up will be important as well, just so that you can learn and know why I'm setting things up the way that I am. So what we did was we set up a Fedora box and a Ubuntu box, and we basically, actually this is Ubuntu and a Fedora box, and we set those up with a bridged network connection so that we can get an actual IP address on my local area network, and it's not just a network address in and of itself for the actual device. Either way it'll reach out to the internet, but we want to be able to connect devices together in this case because we're trying to create a domain and have a domain server where then the clients can log in through the domain server and authenticate and everything like that. So if you want to get that set up, we need to go through that first, and that's again in part 1. So right now I'm going to start up my Fedora box here. So again, you can just click on the little play button. It'll start it up. You won't see it right away, but if you want to see the actual interface, you can hit on open. And we need to do that because I need to find out what IP it got assigned, and then we've got to go make some adjustments. Now, if you have a router at your home that sets up static IP addresses for you, or you have a block of IP addresses that you've already set aside for static IP addresses, then you want to make sure to assign that one of those IP addresses to this Fedora box. So I'm going to hit open here, and it's going to bring it up, and we're not going to spend our whole time inside this Fedora box, but I'm going to log into it real quick here just to get some information about the network. Now again, I'm on this machine that's connected wirelessly, so it seems a little bit laggy, but if you're on a wired connection, it's ridiculously fast. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually just going to open up a terminal here real quick. And for me, I don't set aside address blocks for static addresses. I just kind of assign them as they come up. It doesn't seem to matter on my router whether I do that or not, so it doesn't care. But I'm going to bring this over, and actually I'm going to drag it this way a little bit, and I will make this a little bit larger for you guys real quick. And we're just going to do if config, and it's a little behind on the typing there, but here's what I'm interested in. So it gave it this IP address, which is great, 192.168.7.153. No problem. I have no issue with it having that IP address. That's fine. So there's a few things that we want to do as we go along, and I want to do them in order. But the first thing I want to actually do is I'm going to close that, and I'm going to go here. In the GNOME system, you can go here. There's different ways to get to network settings in different desktop environments, but no matter how you get to it, just make sure you get to your network settings screen, and then here I'm going to click on this little gear icon to bring up the actual settings for the wired connection, which is what this virtual machine thinks it has. And here you can see that it's pulled in all the information from my network router, which is great. But I'm going to go out here to the IPv4 settings, and I'm going to set this to manual because I want to set it myself. I don't want it to be from DHCP. So once that happens, then I'm going to click here and put in 192.168.7.153. And I want it to have that IP address that it already had set. I just want to make sure that it doesn't try to change it later. So I'm going to click in this box for net mask here, 255.255.255.0. This just tells it that the only number difference in the network should be this one. If you want to set this up differently and you know more about networking, feel free, but I just stick with that. And then my gateway is 192.168.7.1. Now you should be entering the information for your network. Don't just copy my numbers, because if you're not using the same masking, it's not going to work. Make sure to find out what your network is using. You could be using 192.168.0, or you could be using 10.2.0.8, or who knows. So make sure that you're using your network information as you do this, but you just want to fill this in manually. Now the next thing is we're going to untick the automatic box for DNS, and I'm going to type in my DNS servers manually here. And this is on purpose. So this is my Pi-hole server, and I'll do something on that that also helps with just getting everything working. It's not something you have to do, but you do need to know what your DNS information is. So whatever's assigning out addresses and picking up machine names. So if that's your gateway, sometimes it's the same thing as your gateway. In my case, I use a different router, but yours might be the same as your actual router. I'm using a Pi-hole in this case. So that's what I'm going to fill in there, and I'm just going to hit apply. And that is going to apply those changes. And then I'm going to turn off the network connection. I'm going to give it just a second, and then I'm going to turn it right back on. And that should be set for what I need. Now the rest of this we can do from a SSH terminal login. So let me just install the SSH client real quick. So again, I'm just going to open up the terminal. You just want to have SSH access. So when you do this, just open up the terminal. And again, this is a little bit laggy. Hopefully yours isn't doing this to you. You may be doing it on the local machine, which should be super fast. But you're going to do yum install, and it's going to go pretty slow. Open SSH-server, and then space -y, just so it doesn't prompt you. And then it should ask for my password here. Nope, it's going to make me type it in as sudo, so that's okay. Just hit the up arrow if it asks you for that, and then hit the back arrow till you get to the beginning, and then type in sudo and space, and then hit enter again, and then it should prompt you for your sudo password, which is great. And this is just so we can get access from a different terminal, and then we can close down the actual GUI part here. Everything should be good. Nothing to do. It was already there. Good. So I'm going to close this window. I'm going to leave it running, and I'm going to go here. So now I'm going to go SSH Brian at 168.7.153. And it says connection refused. Okay, if you get that, you just need to go back into it and make sure to turn on the SSH daemon. Maybe it's not running yet, so again, we will just do terminal one more time here. Hopefully this will get it. And we're going to say sudo systemctl start sshd. So it should look like that, and let me just make that a little bigger so you guys can see what it says. Sudo systemctl start sshd, and then put in your sudo password. Now if we go back to our terminal here, we should be able to SSH in. Yes, so now it asks for the fingerprint and the password, and we are logged in, and you can see, so it says localhost, so we'll have to change a lot of this stuff, but just stick with me and we'll get through that part. So the first thing you actually want to do is sudo dnf update and then -y. So what this is going to do is it's going to run through and update the actual Fedora install. You want to make sure that you've got this thing as up to date as it can be, and it's going to take a little bit because this is a older version of Fedora. There's going to be like 1,000 updates, so I'm not going to make you watch that, and we'll come back after it's done. Alright, after your system's all up to date and everything's finished, you just want to do a quick reboot. So just do sudo reboot, and of course put in your sudo password if it prompts you. And then again, this reboot's really fast, so give it about 30 seconds and you can probably log right back in through the terminal. So we'll come right back after this is logged back in. Okay, now that you've rebooted, you want to SSH back into your Fedora install, and we're going to start the actual installation of FreeIPA. So there's a little bit more setup to do, but we're getting really close. So the first thing we want to do is make sure that our host name's set up correctly. So you can just type hostname and it'll show you what you have. So mine says localhost.localdomain. That's bad. We do not want that. We want the host name that we tried to set whenever we actually created the machine. So this is not hard to fix. You just do, I'm just going to do this all as root. You don't have to. You can use sudo if you want to, but I'm just going to do sudo su, put in my sudo user password here, and then I become root. And now I'm going to do nano/etc/host name. And I'm going to erase this that's here, and I'm going to put in what I want, which is IPA-srv.myhome.local in my case. You should put in what you want for yours. This is just the way that I'm going to identify the IPA server. I'm just going to make sure that I have an extra line there. I'm going to hit Control-O and then Enter to save, and then Control-X to get out of that. Now we're going to do almost the same thing. We're going to do nano/etc/hosts, HOSTS. And here you'll see there's an IPv6 and an IPv4 version. For localhost, just leave those, just hit enter one time to move them down, and then go up one line, and we're going to put in the actual IP address of our install here, and then we're going to hit tab, and I'm going to put IPA-srv.myhome.local, and then I'm going to hit tab one more time and put IPA-srv, just the name by itself. So you always want to make sure that this fully qualified domain name is first, and then you can have just the first part of the domain name out here, and you want to make sure it's the correct IP address, so make sure you type everything in correctly. Localhost is fine to leave here the 127.0.0.1, no big deal. That's always localhost. You just don't want that to be the only entry that you've got. And then you can do Control-O for save, and then hit enter, and then Control-X to exit. So now we've changed both of those things. We're going to reboot again, and we'll give it about 30 seconds to kind of come back up, and we'll SSH back into it. Alright, let's SSH back into that system. And alright, I'm back in. Great. Now I've set this where I have my SSH keys on it now. I'm not using just the password. I'm just going to clear this out, and we're going to do sudo su again. Log in as our sudo user, just because this makes it a little bit easier going through these steps. And now we need to set up the firewall. So the firewall needs certain ports open for FreeIPA to function correctly. And luckily for Fedora, they've actually created a couple of really nice commands that we can use to set that up. So right here we're going to use firewall-cmd, and you can kind of see this command. I'm just going to highlight that thing. I'm going to copy it. I'm going to bring it over here and paste it in. So it's firewall-cmd and then space --add-service equals FreeIPA-LDAP, and then space --add-service equals FreeIPA-LDAPS. There we go. Okay, success. And we're just going to highlight this second command here the same way, and I'll put these in the description and in the show notes so you guys will have them. Don't worry. This will be where you can get to them. But again, we're just adding rules for these things, and it adds all the ports and things that you need. We just hit enter. We should get success back when it works, which is great. So now we're going to do the install of these actual applications. So when you install the FreeIPA server, what that does is it goes out to the repository and it pulls down the actual server software. So we're going to pull down the server software, the server DNS software, and some software called NFS-utils. So this is just pulling it down. This hasn't actually, even though this says install, this doesn't do the full installation and configuration that we need. So this is kind of step one. So just yum install these things. And if you don't want to be prompted about it, just hit -y. Okay, this time it's going to try. I don't know what made it different, but we're going to do DNF install FreeIPA server, FreeIPA server -DNS, and NFS-utils. Again, copying and pasting from my notes may be the issue. It just could be something that I've got that it's catching a character that it shouldn't. So we're going to let this run, and it's going to download those packages and just get them set up. Alright, after you've finished getting that downloaded, everything installed there, those 3 applications, you just want to go ahead and reboot the system one more time, and this is for the NFS-utils. It needs a reboot for everything to kind of kick in and take effect for that particular application. So reboot it, and then you're going to SSH back into the system, which is what I've done here. And then we're going to do sudo su again, just become root here real quick, and I'll clear the terminal. Now we want to run the actual installation configuration of IPA server. So what we need to do here is actually we have to have a flag on it. That's really important. So we're going to run this command called IPA server install and then -- make home directory. So I'll type it out here. So IPA -server -install and then space --mkhomedir. This is very important. You have to do this here, and you need to do this whenever you do the client install on the next segment. So you really need to make sure that everything is getting completed. So make sure you type everything correctly. Once you do, it's going to become an interactive installation. So we're just going to hit enter. It's going to check some things on the system to try to find out, hey, do I have the DNS entries that I need? It's going to tell you it doesn't. So we're just going to go here and quickly, I'm going to make an adjustment in my Pi-hole just to make sure that things are getting routed correctly for DNS. So in order to do that, I'm going to bring up my Pi-hole interface here. Now if you don't have Pi-hole, if you just have like a router that you're using and you can go in and set static addresses with machine names, this is what you want to do on that router as well. So something similar, and I couldn't possibly cover all the router makes or models. So I'm going to go to my Pi-hole here, I'm going to log in. And once I'm logged in, if you're on the right version of Pi-hole, you'll have this this local DNS records. And you can see some of the others that I've made in the past. I'm just going to delete these because I don't have these, I don't have those actual containers anymore. And give me just a second, I'll clean this up. Alright, there we go. Now I've got it all cleaned up. So I want to go in here and actually create an entry for IPA-srv.myhome.local. Make sure that I spelled everything correctly, and then I want to put in the IP address that I've assigned to that system, and then just click add. We'll do the same thing as this for the client as well, but I want to see what the DHCP server gives the client, and then I'll assign it to the client statically once it's done. But there we go. Now we've got our entry in here for my DNS, which also helps everything just kind of run a little bit more smoothly. So once we've done that, we're going to come back here, and at this prompt, you want anything in brackets is keep the default. But here we're going to type yes, and in this case we do want to set up DNS, configure integrated DNS. So it's going to look and see that this is what I've got for my host name. This is why we set the host name, so that it can find this automatically. And here you can just take the default as long as it's got the right information. Same thing for the domain name. That should be just the last 2 bits there of your FQDN. And then for the realm, it's the same in our case anyways. It could be different depending on how you set things up, but in this case it should be the same, and it's just going to be all caps. So one more time, hit enter. Now it's going to ask you for the directory manager password twice, which this is kind of like the super duper admin password. So make it strong. So we're going to put that in here. And then it's going to ask you for the admin password. So this is the password you'll use to log in to the FreeIPA web interface when you're ready. It's also the password that you'll use whenever it asks you for who is the authenticated user to do something if it's in the command line. So make sure when you type this in, again, it's a strong password. And it should be different from your directory manager password. So now that we've typed those things in, it's going to say, okay, checking the DNS domain myhome.local, please wait. And it says, do you want to configure DNS forwarders? In this case, I do, because while this will be a DNS server, I still want to be able to get to the internet, and the DNS forwarder says, hey, you went to me to get your DNS, but I know that I need to go check on this other DNS server. So in this case, it defaults to yes, so I'm going to hit yes. And it's going to ask, you know, what DNS do you want, which is this DNS that I typed in manually in the network manager is what it's finding, and it's saying, hey, you know, this is what's configured in resolve.conf. Is this the server that you want to use for the forwarder? And in this case, yes, it is. And then if it's not, you can type no, and it'll ask you to put it in. But if you type yes, then it also says, you know, do you want to enter another IP address for another forwarder? And if you do, like if you want to use Cloudflare, or if you want to use somebody like that, type in their DNS IP address here, and it'll work. Otherwise, just press enter and it'll skip. So either way, whichever you do, you'll get to the same point as I'm going to get to next. But I'm going to skip this part. So it sets up your forwarders. and it says, do you want to search for missing reverse zones? It's defaulted to yes, just hit enter. It's fine if it doesn't find anything, which it won't in my case. And then it says, do you want to configure crony with NTP server or pool address? In this case, again, I take the default for no. And then it's going to come up and give you a list of everything that it's kind of set and kind of do the confirmation screen. So you should make sure that everything looks right. Your host name, your IP address, your domain, your realm. Double check those things. And then down here it's going to break these things apart. So where you're going to get your CN certificates authority, and this is going to be correct here. Same thing here, and then self-signed in this case is what it's going to be. Don't worry about that. That's fine, and a domain controller. Then down here, just double check that it's got the right DNS information, and no reverse zone is fine. And then it's going to say, do you want to configure the system with these values? You're going to type in YES and hit enter. And now it's going to go through the process of actually running the configuration. So I'm going to leave this up and recording, and then once it's done, I'll kind of speed it up so you don't have to just sit here for the whole time while it does it, because it does take a little time. You know, it takes several minutes for this to run through, but we'll let it kind of run through. Alright, when it finishes, you're going to see a lot of information on the screen, kind of like this, but you should have something that says the IPA client install command was successful, because it does install the IPA client as well as the server. If you keep going up, you'll see other messages as well. So it really spits out a lot of stuff on the screen when it finishes up here. But as you scroll down, you can kind of see all the information that it summarizes for you. And then as you get down here, it'll tell you must make these network ports, make sure these network ports are open. Well, we did that earlier with that firewall-cmd. Remember, I kind of had trouble getting it to run because of the way I was copying and pasting it. So these all should already be open. And then it says now you can, this is an important piece, you can now obtain a Kerberos ticket using the command kinit admin. So we need to put in that command. And then down here at the very bottom, IPA server install command was successful. You should see that as well. So you've got everything set up, and it tells you where your certificates are, and it says that you should back up this folder. So if you're setting this thing in production, make sure to do that step. Make sure to make a backup, and then keep that backup off the machine, you know, somewhere separate, and then you should be ready to go. But we do want to do this command kinit admin, and then it's going to ask you, you know, password for the admin. So this is what I told you to remember. So make sure it was that strong password. Type it in. And that's it. It's not going to give you any feedback, but it sets up the system so that you now have admin capabilities, and the web GUI and everything should be ready to work. So we can test that by opening up a browser window, and we can go to our IP address, and we're just going to hit enter. All right, I'm going to put in my password for my admin user, and I'm going to hit log in. And now we've got the site up, and we'll get into the web user interface here shortly. But first I want to make sure that I can log in from this other machine. So while I've got DNS set up, I'm going to set up one other thing here on my actual local machine. So I'm going to exit out of that. I'm going to clear. And I'm going to go to sudo nano etc hosts. So on my local machine, I'm just going to create a host file for that machine. There we go. It just didn't know how to route it for whatever reason, so it's not being able to get to it through my pie hole for whatever reason. So entering that host file entry just helps me get to the user interface through my local machine here, which is great, and I can do things a little bit quicker than waiting on the actual logged in UI back there in the background. Once you've got everything up and running, you'll be ready to move to the next part where we'll actually install the server client, and then we'll set up a user and we'll start trying to log in from a client machine using IPA credentials. Alright, so we're logged into our system, which is great, and we could start using this right now from the server side, which is fine, but I'll be honest, without having an actual client set up to use it with, it's just not going to be much. So we're going to move off of the browser for now, and we're going to go do the client install. I want to run you through that because I don't want to leave you hanging without having done the client install and making you wait for another video to come out. So let's go do that. So we've got the server running here. Now hopefully you've got your client set up also. And we're just going to start it. If yours isn't already running, make sure you start it up here. Now you want to leave the server running because as we do this, we need the server running, but then we're going to start up the client as well. So you can see my notes over here. And same thing, we're actually just going to log into the client with our terminal here. So I'll make this a little bit bigger for you guys. And that's a lot bigger, but hopefully you can see everything I'm typing without any issues. If you're on your phone, hopefully it works out for you as well. So we're going to SSH into that client, which I believe was 192.168.7.2. What was it? I don't remember what it was. So let's go find out what it was, because I should be able to remember these things. We'll open it up. That's the good thing about logging in. We can just open it up here and log in. It's a little slow, like I said, when I'm on this machine, just because it's wireless. I just need to quit being lazy and run an Ethernet cable over here, but I haven't done it yet. We're just going to look at the IP address and move on anyways, so no big deal. So I'm going to hit terminal here. And IP ADDR. Show and 154. Okay, let me make sure that is what oh, maybe I didn't even know the IP address yet. Okay, 154. So I didn't know the IP address yet. Oh, let's see, we need to install one more thing, just because again I want to SSH into this and it does not come with SSH pre-installed. So let's do this. We will do, and I'll make this bigger as well, sudo apt update. Just make sure we get all the updates done. Just give that a second to finish. I'll clear that out, and then we'll do sudo apt install open ssh -server and then -y after a space. So if you do this, it will go out and get open SSH server and install it and actually start it running. And then we can just log in from the terminal to do a lot of what we need to do. But the first part actually is going to be very similar to what we did on the other system. So first we want to go set this as a static IP address. So I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to click over here on the right, click on wired settings, and I'm going to go into the actual settings for that that connection using the gear icon. And so we can see again we've got the same setup that we had before. So we just want to go to IPv4, set that to manual. And then we want to go down here and type in 192.168.7.154. In my case, again, you should be doing the numbers that are set up on your system, making sure that you have a bridged connection. Next is 255.255.255.0. So we're just doing a regular subnet. We're not doing any class. We're doing a class C, not a class B or A. And then here is my gateway is 192.168.7.1. You should enter the values that are correct for your gateway. I'm going to turn off automatic for DNS, and I'm going to put in 192.168.7. Now yours might be the same as your gateway. So if you're just using a router and you don't have a separate DNS server that you're using today, just put in the gateway address. That's fine. That should get everything forwarded to the internet for you. In my case, I'm running a Pi-hole, so I need to put in that IP address, so it's just a little bit different. So I'm going to put that address in, and then I'm going to hit apply. And then I'm going to turn off the network connection for just a few seconds, and then I'm just going to re-enable it because that will kick in those settings for me. And now I have a static network connection set up, and I can actually leave the user interface side just so it's not so laggy. So I'm going to close that out, and we'll come back to our screen here. Oops, not quite so big there. And that's 154. We're going to log in here. Yes, I trust it. And I'll put in my password, and I'm going to clear that out. So now you can see I'm logged into IPA01, which is what I want to be logged into. So the first thing we want to check, just like before, is our host name. We want to make sure we've got a proper host name, which right now it says IPA01, which is good, but we need the entire fully qualified domain name. So we're going to do a sudo nano /etc/host name. Make sure you spell it right or it won't work. And you got to put in your password. And then you can see it's just IPA01, so we actually want that to say IPA01.myhome.local. And again, if you pick a different subdomain, then you or it's different domain, then you should put that in. But whatever you pick, make sure it's there. If you did mydomain.local or localdomain.local or whatever, just make sure that you type in the right thing. Make sure there's one line below it, and then hit Control-O to save, hit Enter, and then Control-X. Now we're going to do the same thing with etc/hosts. So we're going to do sudo nano /etc/hosts, just like that. It's going to open up, and again, now in this case you see it's got IP01 myhome.local and IPA01, and it's got the local address there. We need to also add the full address, so we're going to do that, 192.168.7.154. We're going to hit tab, and we're just going to put in IPA01.myhome.local. Now again, make sure you're typing in the one you want to use. Okay, and we're going to make one other entry in this case, and we're going to make that our server. So 192.168.7.153, and that's going to be IPA serve, so whatever your server is, myhome.local, and then IPA SRV out here. So make sure that you make an entry at the top for this local machine, put in the full IP address and its full domain name and its little short domain name. And then just below that little entry there, make a line and then put in your full IP address for your server and the IPA serve or whatever you called your server, and the full domain name and then the short domain. Once you've got that in, hit Control-O, hit Enter to save it, and then Control-X. Now from here we could actually just reboot, but let's go ahead and do our update and upgrade to get our system all up to date and everything, and then we'll do our reboot, and then we'll install some other software that we need. So we're going to do sudo apt update, 2 ampersands, sudo apt upgrade, and then -y. We're going to hit enter. It's going to start the update and upgrade process, and then I won't make you guys sit through this completely. I'll come back when it's finished. Alright, the update's done, so we're just going to do a quick reboot here. We're going to let that reboot, and we'll come back into it here in about 20 or 30 seconds. So the next few parts are pretty important, and it's important that you have all of that network stuff set up that we just did for the host names and the IP addresses. So make sure that you've set that correctly, because if you don't, you're going to run into issues. This is one of the things that really tripped me up quite a bit. All of the instructions and all of the tutorials that are out there are good, they're fine, and if you know how to do networking and things, they work really great. I'm not a networking expert, I know enough about it, but a lot of times I kind of need somebody to tell me a little bit more detail, like what do you mean? So they would say, hey, you need to have this set up, hey, you need to have that set up, hey, you need to have this, hey, you need to have that. They weren't being real specific. It never branched off to tell you, here's how you do that, or here's where you do that in this system. And that was really throwing me off quite a bit when I was trying to do those updates. So please make sure you've got that stuff set up. That's why I went through it with you. And then we'll get on with the next part. So I'm going to log back into that system here. And it looks like it's coming back up. Good deal. So now we need to actually go and get the FreeIPA client. So this is just like when we did going to get the FreeIPA server on the server side. It does a little bit of a download and install, but it's not the full installation configuration. But with the client on Ubuntu, it does ask you some questions up front, so it's important for you to know what your domain is and what your realm is and things like that, because it's going to ask you those questions right here when we do this download and install. So kind of be ready for that. So we're going to do sudo apt install FreeIPA-client. It's going to give you your password prompt here, enter your password, and when you start, it's going to say, are you sure you want to do this? Yes, and then hit enter. And then as it goes down, you'll see it's going to pop up with this question. So having that stuff set, it pre-filled this information for us. So just make sure that it's correct, which is myhome.local. That's great. That's what we want. That's in my case, that's what I want. You want it to be whatever you're using. We're going to hit tab so that OK is highlighted and hit OK. And then it's going to say enter the host name of the Kerberos server. In this case, this is the same server that we're doing everything else on, so we don't need to enter anything different. We just need to make sure that we type it in correctly. So IPA_SRV.myhome.local. Make sure you type whatever yours is and make sure you type it correctly, then tab over to OK and hit enter. Now it's going to ask for the administrative server. This is the same server. We are not doing something different. We're not doing something special. We aren't running multiple servers in this case. So again, it's the same server, IPA_SRV.myhome.local. Okay, hit tab to get to OK and hit OK. And then it's going to finish up with the download and the install. It doesn't take very long. It's usually pretty quick. Just kind of let it run through. It's going to depend on your internet speed, and it's going to depend on the machine you've got and how many CPUs you gave it and how much memory and stuff like that. But once it's finished, then we're really kind of well on our way to getting everything set up and having this ready to go. So kind of the next few steps are not super tricky. In fact, it's pretty easy because now we're actually going to run the installer. So we're going to actually use IPA-client-install, and then we're going to do --mkhomedir. Again, this part is extremely important. This flag right here is very, very important. So you have to make sure that you add this flag. If you don't, you're going to get everything done. It's going to say success, and you're going to go create a user account, and then you're going to try to log in, and it's going to act like it did something. It's not going to give you any error, but it's not going to log you in. It's going to bring you back to the login prompt, and it's going to drive you insane. I know this because it's what I did, and it drove me nuts, and I thought I had something incorrect or wrong. And I didn't. I just didn't include this flag, so it wasn't making a home directory because I didn't have that set up. So you want to do sudo, and I'm just going to do this as su and then hyphen. So on Ubuntu, you do sudo su and then a space and hyphen. And then if you already had your sudo password in for the install and it still hasn't timed out, it's just going to put you in as root. And I'm going to clear that out. And now I'm going to do IPA-client-install --mkhomedir. Just again, make sure you have that flag before you run this command. And then it's going to be a little bit interactive, so just be ready for that. So we're going to hit enter. It's going to go through and it's going to say, hey, DNS discovery failed. I get this every time. I don't know why. On the ones that I see online, their DNS discovery works every time, but they're using CentOS or Fedora or Red Hat or something. Haven't seen one with Ubuntu, so this is what I get. It's fine. And it's just asking, what's your IPA server? And it's saying, what is the domain? So it's not asking for the entire server. It just wants the domain, so that's just the last part. So myhome.local in my case. If yours is different, make sure to type in your domain. Then it's going to ask, what is your IPA server name? So this is IPA-srv.myhome.local. And then it's going to go through and it's going to say, hey, the failure to use DNS, find your IPA server, indicates that your resolve.conf file. Well, this is baloney because you can't set the resolve.conf file anymore on Ubuntu because they changed it to be some kind of crazy stuff with NetPlan that I don't really comprehend how to change it. I don't really want to go through it and mess with it. So we're going to say, this is fine. Don't worry about the DNS discovery. We're just going to say yes right here. It says proceed with fixed values and no DNS discovery. You're going to type in YES and you're going to hit enter. It's going to say, do you want to configure Crony within TP? And again, we're just going to take the default on this just like we did on the server. We're going to leave it like that and we're just going to hit enter again. And it's going to say, okay, here's the stuff that I have. This is what I'm about to run with. Are you sure this is what you want to go with? So make sure that it has the client hostname correct, which it should if you typed everything in the hostname and host file like we said. Make sure it's got the realm set as your domain, all in caps. And then again, make sure it's got your DNS domain and then your correct server. And then this should be the first part of your domain and this should be that last part of your domain. And if everything there looks good, you're going to type in YES one more time to say, continue to configure with these values. This is what we want to do, yes. And then hit enter. It's going to try to do your Crony C configure time sync, so just be patient while it does this. Now it's going to ask you for the user that's authorized to enroll computers. This is your admin user, so admin should be the name. and then whatever you created for your admin password, make sure it was a strong password, type that thing in, hit enter, and it's going to keep going through this setup. And at the end, you should get IPA client install command was successful. This is what you're looking for. If you get this, we should be well on our way to everything that we need to get going with having this stuff set up and ready to go. So I'm going to finish this video here. Hopefully you've gotten success, but if you haven't, I want to give you time to dig in. If you get an error, it always tells you, hey, here's where the log is. It's really important that you check those logs to see if something went wrong or something wasn't installed or something weird happened. If you're following me, you shouldn't have any major issues. You saw that I had a couple of little weird things happen. You may have that, so that's why I want to stop here. I want to give you time to make sure that you're successful. And if you are, then we'll have another video in a couple of days, and we'll start going through the user interface on the web GUI. We'll set up a user, and then we'll come back and start to actually log in with that user, authenticating against the domain. So I hope this has been helpful. If you enjoyed this video, like, subscribe, share it with your friends so they can come along on the journey with us, and I'll talk to you next time.